Hello. Thank you for joining me for tonight's somber discussion of the Polytrickall system. It's a morbid subject, um, uh, but on a serious note, I really am going to offer the solution to all of the world's problems, basically, at least on a political level and on a sociological and cultural level, and interpersonal level. It's actually very simple, and it's something that we have heard from every spiritual system worth its salt. Most of them are probably doing more harm than good at this point. Um, but they've at least contained this message, this encouragement to embrace this impulse that I think we all have, anyways. Uh, and um, it's this idea that we are all one. I think in the Bible, I think Jesus said, "Love your brother as you would love yourself, or love your neighbor, excuse me, as you would love yourself." And I think that our tendency as a culture to embrace this, or have this acceptance that people just kind of have masks. Um, we come up with a set of cultural standards in terms of morality and virtue that we accept, and then everyone does their best to create a facade that they embody those things. When in reality, they're very self-serving, and everyone knows that. So everyone kind of knows that everyone else's veneer is a facade. But in order to make society work, we kind of act like we believe in each other's bullshit. And then generally what you see is people see through it, and then you have gossip. This is like, your basic modern culture. And I think that there's kind of this pretentious, um, uh, uh, like the spiritual movement, or this crowd thinks that they're different. And in reality, in my experience, it's generally worse. With a few exceptions. Of course, these blanket statements don't apply to everyone, but these generalities do, in general, apply to the general population. Um, and so, what we have to do, if we are going to really affect any kind of meaningful change, is to actually love thy neighbor as you would love yourself. And the reality is that this is not some metaphysical um, fantasy, or some kind of woo. It's. I think the fundamental reality is that we are generated and sustained spiritually and materially by a single consciousness, and we experience division for the sake of union. Um, it's a systole and diastole process of fragmentation and then becoming whole again. And it is reflected perfectly in every single life, and in the grander movements of cultures and civilizations and planets, I would think. And I also think that it's what the universe and its macrocosmic function is doing as well. Um, and so, I mean, that's what a cell, a human cell, it divides, and then it comes together with another one. It creates another cell dividing, breeding is what I'm kind of awkwardly referencing there. And, really what inspired this was thinking about this was Afghanistan, and Biden's withdrawal. And there's just so much baggage to unpack. As soon as I mentioned that, all this crap came bubbling up into my head, most of which I don't even want to think about or talk about. And it's difficult because um, we really need to address all this stuff bluntly and holistically. Uh, but no matter how you do it, you are very likely to offend someone. So, um, it's a difficult subject to broach. I'm gonna do my best to who am I kidding? I'm not even gonna try not to offend anyone. Um, have you found sacred herb? I mean, yeah, there's sacred herbs all over the place. I'm not sure what you're referencing exactly. There's all kinds of. There's ayahuasca, like, right there outside the window. And it's growing into a cacao tree, which actually, if we may digress for a moment, the other day I went out I'm doing the Lesser Banishing Ritual of the Pentagram as the first segment of my ritual magic course for my patrons, and I finished it, but when I went back into the Adobe program, it had puppy's having a nightmare. It had completely deleted the files, all of them, so I have to start over. So I went out to start filming again, and I'm sure you guys have heard of bullet ants. It's the most painful thing in the world of any insect. And so I went out to the ayahuasca vine, which is actually growing up in the cacao tree, which is another one of the plantas maestras, the plant keepers, sacred medicinal plants of the Amazon, and a very important staple food as well. And so this ayahuasca vine is growing up into the cacao, so it's just like this really magical spot. And so I sat with my arms kind of on the vine and did the first segment of the. I almost want to wake up that puppy so it stops bothering me, distracting. Will you do something with that thing? I can't concentrate. Thank you. Anyway, so I did the segment, and then the next day I went out, and there's bullet ants all over the vine and all over the tree, and I don't know how I did that without getting stung, but anyways, that was a trip to go out there and realize that I thought I'd looked around, but I guess not. Bullet ants, I mean, like 100 of them. It was crazy. Where are we going? Okay, so Afghanistan. And so what I was thinking about, particularly, is the fact that the United States creates wars not to win them, but because, they always go to war with someone and then they don't win and then they just leave after a while. I'm still not sure what precipitates withdrawal. Maybe it's, I don't know, because it seems to me that the purpose of the war is just to sell tank treads and bullets and bombs and maybe secure the poppy fields so that the CIA can use the heroin to fund black ops, and that's not conspiracy. It's totally something the CIA has admitted to with cocaine. This is just something that they do. In fact, there's lots of pictures online of this is going to sound muffled, I think. Of U.S. soldiers patrolling opium poppy fields online. They're not burning them; they're just taking control of them. So yeah, I think that the U.S. just goes and they fight wars to make money for the military-industrial complex with no intention of winning. And then, all these layers of what was happening really started to hit me. That China has just threatened to nuke Japan, and I'm sure Japan is over there going, why is it always us these assholes are dropping nukes on? It's just this little island of very honorable people, mind your own business, and everyone wants to rain down the same energy that lights the stars kindled on their little island, which is not nice at all, burning people's shadows on the sidewalks and whatnot. Highly inappropriate. And so, and we have this tension with China and the U.S., and so the U.S. can't defeat the Taliban in 20 years, and people are supposed to feel like China isn't a threat. So that's just mind-bogglingly insane, all of this stuff. But let's try to stay focused on one topic at a time here. The U.S. fights wars for profit, and for a long time, I've heard people say things to that effect, but it's only in the last couple of months that I've seen like a lot of mainstream kind of normal-looking guys in suits on Twitter and stuff, uh, taking up this narrative and like just saying it as bluntly as I do. And I think that we can no longer accept that as normal. What we have, when we talk about accepting our veneers, or when I was talking about accepting our veneers, our social masks, as the authentic person, even though we know that's not what it is, we are setting up a precedent in our behavioral inclinations, our disposition, that is going to apply to other systems like the government. So we kind of have this mechanism that is almost like a coping mechanism for adapting to a very sick society, right? It's like we have to be maladapted in order to fit in to this awful, toxic monster that we've created, and to act as if things are normal that are actually completely horrific. The United States government dropped nukes on 2 cities full of men, women, and children. I don't know that people really, I know people say like, that's horrible and that we should never allow it to happen again, but I think that the realistic reaction that people really should have had to an atrocity like that, which is basically pulling people out of federal buildings and drawing and quartering them or something, didn't happen, obviously. And so I come up with this slogan that I'm planning on putting on t-shirts and coffee mugs or something, because we're, really trying to raise money. I think the plan has kind of come clear, and I'll talk about that in a minute. But if you are complacent, you are complicit at this point. There's no longer, neutrality is not acceptable. If you are not fighting to change what is accepted as normal in our society, you are one of the Nazi death camp attendants, basically. Like, everyone is shouldering that, in my opinion. If you're not at least speaking out, if you're not engaging in some degree of an act of rebellion, then you are just as guilty as the person that is pushing the button in the White House, or China dropping bombs in Japan, or whatever it is. It's just true, I think that, as a society, we need to stop accepting people's masks as their real identity and just be real with people all the time. This is a good practice to start creating a world that actually makes sense. Truth is self-substantiating, and energetic charges are they are moving, they are compelling other events. And so if we engage in any kind of actions that compel energy to move in a positive and constructive direction, it's going to affect change. But at this point, I think our circumstances are so dire, and the consequences of non-action are, witnessing the epilogue and swan song of the human fable. We all have to take responsibility for diffusing the machine and changing the direction of mankind. And like I said, it's hard for people to accept, but I can honestly say I think I'm in that place. I barely even have the capacity to see my own stuff as my own property. I'm not really advocating for communism, of course, or any ism, schism bullshit. But when it comes to like my own son, for example, um, I value his life tremendously, but I don't know that I value the lives of random children that I don't know any less, really. And I think that our tendency to do that with our own children, at least to the extreme degree that we do in our society, um, comes from having been detached from the tribal, the village, and I was thinking about this yesterday that the sort of like Aleister Crowley and the Western occult, a lot of those schools of thought, even Rudolf Steiner, they were advocating for the dissolution of the traditional family unit. And when a lot of people hear that, they're kind of horrified and they think that it's like an attack on Christian values. And I mean, I hope it is to some extent. But I think what's really being targeted there, for example, is the structure of it and the way that we are culturally programmed to understand family as almost sort of a separation from, or a way to negate a broader connection. And, for example, when someone says you should just respect your father just because it's your father, that actually doesn't make any sense. And this is something that, conservatives will lose their mind over. But it doesn't make any sense. If your father is a misogynistic, racist, alcoholic douchebag, then fuck your father. You don't need to have respect for him. You don't have to like him. You don't, when I was a kid, I've always been this way. When I was a kid and people said, you have to love your family, and I thought, why? You love people based on their merits and how you relate to them, not just because you happen to be born into a, genetic association with these other people. It doesn't make any sense to, it's the same, and then we have this insane, like, you have to be objective about your own parents. That extends to our capacity to be objective about our leaders, because ultimately the President of the United States is a patriarchal figure. He is a father figure. And I have seen people, even people that I've known, that will like speak out against the president, and then are a presidential candidate, right? But then as soon as they get elected, suddenly they're loyal. Oh, I don't like him, but he's my president. I mean, it's super sick and disturbing and twisted, but it's an extension of that same mentality of, respect and love your father because he is your father. No, don't do that. Be objective, you know what I mean? If your father was insane and abusive and was not a good role model, you need to just be able to objectively recognize that in the interest of being able to neutralize the influence that it had on you. And so once you, and the reason we have to start with the things closer to us is partly in the interest of time, because these immediate influences, if we can analyze and neutralize them, they will automatically extend to those other related, or they're like reflections of the nucleus of our psychological constitution. So a complete dissolution and reorganization of how we relate to each other, how we relate to our idea of culture, total and complete rejection of government. And I think that what will happen is that this concept of loving your neighbor as if it were yourself, if certain other steps are taken, it's something that evolves naturally because it is our natural state of consciousness. Or it's the way that we function now is unnatural. And if we are in a balanced, healthy relationship with our environment and our culture, what I'm describing is something that will develop organically. Well, that would be good, I guess, if China didn't want to meet Japan. But the only point I'm getting at there is that people need to kind of recognize where they're not being realistic. And I think that the United States just tucking its tail between its legs after fighting a relatively small terrorist organization in Afghanistan for 20 years. I don't know how it is. I mean, when I've mentioned that it could be a problem that we have tensions with China, and people just laugh. After this Afghanistan debacle, I don't think it's that fucking funny, you know? And if you look at like global like maps of trade from 20 years ago, there's it's online somewhere where it's like blue and then red for China, and there's a globe from 20 years ago, and then there's now, and there's almost nothing left for the U.S. Which is, it's almost another topic, but that's one of the things that we really need to work on, all of us, I guess, is just being able to perceive things as they actually are. It's incredible to me how difficult that seems to be for people. That's something that I've been thinking about too, that I've neglected to mention in these live streams recently, is that I think where a lot of spiritual systems go wrong and where people that are trying to develop themselves spiritually fail is that they try to impose states that have to develop organically. They can be catalyzed. They may be produced by your journey in evolution in consciousness, but it doesn't actually help to just impose them upon, unnaturally. And a good example of that is like asceticism, or what is it? Where you don't have sex ever. Well, that. I think that through the process of ascending through different states of consciousness, you may come to a point where you are detached from animal instincts, and not because they're low or bad, and I intentionally avoided using the terminology lower. This is not how it works, I think. These things have to develop organically, and you can't just impose them upon yourself and think that that's going to lead to spiritual growth. It has to be authentic, and that's why religion has failed, and we still live in such a fucked up world. I mean, if you guys follow the channel, you know that I'm kind of struggling right now with my own decision, like whether to return to civilization and try to integrate myself back into a culture that I have utter contempt for, really. I can't stand it. I mean, even when we go to town here, just to like eat or because we have to go grocery shopping anymore, both of us hate it. We both absolutely hate it. Just to even have to look at it or be exposed to the energy of it at all is, it's just really unpleasant for me anymore. But that being said, I really do miss playing in a band, and I miss certain parts of California. There are places in the United States where the culture is amazing, and people really are evolved, and it's not so alienating to be new and try to go to the grocery store. And it's not just when I'm in a foreign country, you know. I mean, it's crazy to, you know, to like try to drive across the United States and have to go into like a gas station in Utah or a Walmart somewhere, anywhere really. It's just such culture shock. Okay, so I mean, I think I've more or less made my point about this, and I feel like I delivered what I promised, which is that, you know, if we can evolve in consciousness, then we can resolve all the conflicts in the world. And if we do not, and we don't do it rapidly, and we don't commit to it, we're all going to die. And it really is that simple. And I'm sorry if it's hard for you to hear, but it's the truth. And, you know, a lot of people have gotten angry with me and called me callous and worse because I don't really value human life more than animal life or any life. I see all of life as like one big net of consciousness. And that doesn't mean that I would kill a person just as easily as I might, you know, swat a bug or something. But honestly, I take spiders outside. Like, the only reason I would kill an insect is if it was attacking me, and I would kill a human being for the same reason. I mean, and it's not about having less regard for human life. It is about having this reverence for all of life and all of creation. You know, there have been a few occasions recently where I've gone out into the jungle with someone, and I am just enthralled and mystified and enraptured by every little detail of all of the little plants, and, you know, the number of times, not just here in the jungle, but in the United States too, when I'll point out something that I find incredible, and people just, they don't care, you know, people just, it's like by the time you're an adult, you're just jaded and lame, and, you know, if it's not money or sex or something, it seems like adults just don't give a shit. I mean, and of course, that's not true of all of them. It's really, really common. And so that's, you know, that's part of the antidote, to be in the mystery. And it's not really that difficult to allow inspiration to come flooding in and to overwhelm the cynicism and the, you know, disappointment and the fears and to tear down the walls that have been built by trauma and disappointment and repetition, you know. When a pattern repeats for long enough, we will start to assume that the pattern is going to extend indefinitely. And we always have the power to reorient ourselves in terms of our experience, so that we can relate to these patterns in a different way, even if they do insist upon repeating. And so, you know, this message is the same as every other video I've ever made, every live stream that I ever do, that the gnosis, that the expansion of our consciousness and the, you know, the resolution of trauma through recognition and stepping through your shadow, you know. Once you recognize this thing, of course you have to take some steps to integrate a new perception. But that's it, you know, gnosis, I'm still, even after all the disappointments and trauma and struggles, the unexpected struggles of the last couple of years, I'm still totally convinced that it is possible to catalyze consciousness in every individual at least to the extent that we can reorient the trajectory of the planetary culture. It's not beyond our means. We're all connected, literally at this point, with technology. We have so many tools at our disposal, and I realize that when I'm talking like this, there's this sort of utopian implication. But whenever anyone tells me that they don't believe in miracles, I am always baffled because we wake up in one every day. When someone says to me, that's impossible, that doesn't mean anything. It doesn't rule anything out. That is true, maybe. Whatever it is, it could be true that it's impossible. But so is existence, and it's already happened. Here we are. So, I don't think that there's any fault to be found in lofty thinking and to aim for the stars and hope to land on the moon. I have had to confront the fact that I have lived in these little pockets of like very progressive areas in the Colorado Rockies and in California and Vilcabamba, Ecuador, and places where there's a very high concentration of people of the psychedelic mind, and people who are self-governing, and that definitely, it makes it easier to believe that the world could suddenly take a step into a sort of utopian homeostasis. And then I'll see a video of what's up, man, and of a massive city. I'm reminded of all the violence in the ghettos and all the crazy religious extremists in the Middle East, and all the idiot redneck Christian Bible Belt crap. And then it's like, okay, so you're saying that we can just like talk all these people into having gnosis and taking psychedelics, and they're suddenly all just going to be cool somehow? It does seem like quite a stretch. But I think that there are a couple of things that we can take solace in as very, very realistic, grounded in a mechanistic process, right? Laws of causality, of energy, that very, very strongly suggest that we can get our job done. And that whenever we change our rate of oscillation, whenever we transcend our lower states of consciousness and elevate our own individual consciousness, we are pulling the entire net of consciousness up with us. So even these people that seem so far beyond reach that we have no hope of, using linguistic acrobatics and pyrotechnics and whatever other, powers of persuasion through politicking and conversation, that we know from the law of entrainment that, anything that cycles entrains with the highest oscillation. So if there's, one thing oscillating in the system and it's increasing its speed, it's pulling all of the other oscillating things up with it. And human consciousness is measured, no, we can't say consciousness, but our brain activity is measured in oscillations. And so, there's entrainment, and I don't want to beat that to death, but those are really powerful, it's really powerful knowledge to carry with us, that when we change ourselves, that when we free ourselves from the mind-forged manacles, so that we can improve our own experience of life, and have experiences of greater depth and get greater satisfaction and experience greater variety, that right? That is extending itself just through the act. At least the potential is expanded for other people that may not be there yet. So when you're helping yourself, you're helping everyone. And it is really just, thinking about all this in the last week has inspired me to really try to recommit to my own work, my own path. My health has been very up and down, but it's starting to stabilize. I think, the last couple of days were really hard. Been getting some lesions and stuff that, I mean, that's scary, to be that sick for that long. And I mean, it's been very difficult. Things we've encountered way more difficulties than I ever would have expected. Looking back at where I was when I left the United States, I can't believe I did it. That I walked away from my $10,000 worth of musical gear and my band and just abandoned everything. And just really in the last couple of days, it's really started to bother me. Like really, really, really bother me a lot. Like I wake up feeling sick, like not sick, like from not being healthy, but like insect fear. I heard Garcia describe it as this horrific dissatisfaction and disbelief and fear almost, that I won't be able to get back to where I was and pick the thread up and continue, because it's my purpose, I think. The social media thing, I've complained recently that, I used to get upset after a couple of days my videos didn't get 1,000 views, and now some of them are getting 80 views after a week or whatever. And I think that if I was making music as well, that is the missing ingredient to really extend my reach and feel like I'm having some impact. So what I'm getting at with all that, because I know, some of you guys that are listening have asked me even today what's going on. I think today I've been vacillating back and forth between just like going into the jungle and living with the Warani if I can, and just never coming out because fuck Western civilization, and I don't even know if I can do it. How am I going to do it? Like what am I going to do to survive? COVID has changed a lot. The marijuana industry in California, it sounds like it's doing better, but it would require a re-entry fee. You have to have money to do anything. In order to move my family back to the United States, I probably need like 10 grand. Realistically, if I'm gonna have a car to get around to work, and then to get an apartment or a room somewhere, and then I have no musical gear, I got a lot to make up for, and I have to do it very rapidly if it's gonna be meaningful. And so. But I think what I've decided is that the Warani, we saw the women the other day in town, and they mentioned it again. You guys should come and we'll cook food and go swimming. And I realized, this is crazy that I'm here. This is the tribe that I was reading about as a child, and now I accidentally wound up here, and they're inviting me to come and spend time with them in their village, and that's amazing. So. I need to quit procrastinating. Honestly, I've been doing it because it's going to cost money, and we don't have any. And so, but I just decided that the 3rd of September or so, we're just going to go and just, have faith. But this is basically what I'm saying is my plan, is that I'm not going to go live in the jungle with the Gorani. I am going to go into the jungle with them, and I think that it'll probably give me an opportunity to, we're going to be here for at least 2 more months to drink ayahuasca with a shaman that has had no contact with civilization ever. And that is a huge opportunity, and it's a big deal. And I think it's sort of like the final step for me in this journey of healing. Because, I've told you guys, I made no secret, I used to be a fucked up monkey, man. I had a really rough upbringing. I've been witness to a lot of violence. I've committed a lot of violence. Carrying around all this guilt for decades, and my mom's suicide and the last interaction with her being so bad, and it's just, it's like even as I was able to process and deal with it, I would be saddled with more of it. So I think I'm finally at a place where I can finally be the person I need to be to do what it is I came here to do. but it's going to take a ton of luck. It's going to take a lot of work and perseverance, and I'm thinking that what I'm determined to do now, and part of the problem I think is that I haven't had a clear vision. I wasn't sure, like what to do. I would vacillate back and forth. I want to go back into music. I want to go to the jungle and just stay there. But I think that I understand now. I need to go into the jungle, spend some time with the Warani, figure out what has been holding me to this particular spot in the Amazon rainforest so hard since I was a child that I ended up here by chance, 30 years later. I'm sure it's going to be a big fucking deal, whatever is waiting there. And so we're only a couple of weeks out from that, maybe 2 weeks. So that's it. I guess we're going to try to do some print-on-demand t-shirts. I have this Born Against Christians shirt that I want to make. And, and then if you're complacent, you are complicit. And I was going to come up with a bunch of slogans and try to build an online store and just do everything we can to raise money, put bullet ants on my balls and put it online and see if maybe I can get some, I don't know, whatever I have to do, because I have to buy gear, I have a guitar that's not really going to work for live performance, no amp. I mean, I got a lot of work to do. So, that being said, thank you guys so much for supporting. A lot of you guys that have really helped us out a lot, and I will not forget that shit. And I feel like I had to process a lifetime of darkness over the last few years, and it's not quite finished. So I have to drink a little bit more medicine. And hopefully, I still have this inheritance thing that should have been resolved 2 years ago. That's why we're stuck here. We were told it was going to be 1 year. I'll have $20,000. We should go back. We were not supposed to be here. This is not how I was. $20,000 to $30,000 in 1 year. This is 2 years ago. So it was already overdue. So, but that situation that hopefully still eventually will be resolved, and maybe we'll find out that once I've done exactly what I need to do here, that money will finally come through, and then I'll be performing again. So thank you guys so much, and we'll see you again soon.